One of the first things people ask us when they find out that we're getting married is, how did you meet? We never get tired of telling this story, because ultimately, it is a testimony to God's faithfulness in our lives. Our God receives all of the glory for the tale that we are about to tell you. As King Solomon declared in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it, so that people fear before him. Our prayer is that this story would cause you to give the glory due his great name. Amber and I met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's graduation party. The day is crystal clear in each of our memories.
First of all, I remember that this was not a graduation party that I had wanted to attend. I went as a matter of good etiquette, and I have been so glad ever since. My first memory of Eric was the moment he walked in the door with his father. I was sitting in the living room talking to several young ladies on the couch when I noticed him. I found him to be quite handsome, but the thing that attracted me to him the most was his servant's heart. After we had finished dinner that evening, Eric went about the room collecting all of the paper plates, cups, and napkins. Eric was different than any man I had ever met. He seemed to be a man of noble character, and I could tell that he really loved the Lord. One funny thing that I remember about him from that evening was an incident that occurred during a friendly ball game. While jumping to catch a ball, Eric accidentally kicked me in the head, knocking me to the ground. I began laughing hysterically. He looked down at me with a quizzical expression on his face, and when I told him that he had just kicked me in the head, he began to apologize profusely. I still find myself laughing over that incident.
Well, when I first saw Amber, I was instantly attracted to her. She had a radiant smile on her face pretty much the whole night, and there was just something about her that seemed different. She seemed to be just abounding with joy that was unspeakable. I was actually kind of nervous around her. I didn't talk a lot to her that whole night, even though I wished I had. One of the things I remember from that night is that I called her Amanda twice, which was pretty embarrassing for me. Driving home from the party, I realized that I was sad that I hadn't talked to her more. I was sitting there in silence, and my dad said, "Eric, what are you thinking about?" And I told him I met this girl Amber at the graduation party, and I don't know if I'll ever see her again, but I really hope I do. It was amazing because I had never even been attracted to a girl in that way before, or thought about a girl that I had not even officially met. So I was very sad after leaving the party because I thought that I would never see her again. Well, God had other plans in mind. A week later, I met one of Amber's friends, Jackie, at another graduation party. Jackie invited Krishan and me to hang out with a group of her friends. After spending some time together, I realized, much to my surprise and excitement, that Jackie was Amber's best friend. Over the coming months, I was able to get to know Amber by spending time with her and our group of friends. I was drawn to her, and after a few months, I fell in love with her. Her sweetness, her love for the Lord, and her free-spiritedness had captivated my heart. I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her.
At this point in the story, my heart was completely unattached to Eric. I had perceived that he was already interested elsewhere, and this allowed for me to get to know him without any of those warm, fuzzy feelings that come with attraction. I am so thankful that the Lord allowed me to get to know Eric this way. I was never worried about what he thought of me, and I never said or did things to attract him. I was just free to be me, and it was wonderful. It was a memorable summer. At the end of that summer, my friend Jackie informed me that Eric had an interest in me, and I was shocked to the point of disbelief. He had been such a gentleman not to show his affections openly before seeking my father's blessing.
So there came a point a few months after meeting Amber that I felt like God was leading me to pursue her in marriage. I talked to her father and asked his blessing for me to pursue her in a courtship. He didn't want us to enter a courtship right away, however, but he did want Amber and me to spend some time together and just to get to know each other more.
As Eric and I continued to spend more time together, my affections for him began to grow. More and more, I was noticing what an incredible man he was. His talents, abilities, and character reminded me so much of my papa. Papa was always my best friend, and it was so natural for me to enjoy spending time with Eric and to begin to love him. But this is the part of the story where I caution the young ladies in my life. God did work through my mistakes, but I don't believe that it was his plan for me to give pieces of my heart to Eric before we had a commitment for marriage. Girls, it is so easy to allow your heart to soar above your head, but guard it. Guard your heart above all else, for it is the wellspring of life. A year after meeting Eric, I truly wanted to marry him. But there was also a conflicting desire in me. I also wanted to be a missionary to South America. And that was not a direction that Eric felt the Lord was leading him. So the conflict was, how in the world can I marry a man whose dreams don't line up with mine? I thought that Eric was the most amazing man that I had ever met. But with my parents' counsel, I decided that I couldn't marry him, no matter how much I loved him already.
This was really difficult for me. I loved Amber dearly, but I also wanted her to pursue what she felt like God was leading her to pursue. So after months and months of discussing this and my internal turmoil and her thinking about it, she, along with her parents' guidance, decided to end our relationship. This was devastating for me. We had known each other for roughly a year, and I was deeply in love with her by this point. I loved her with all of my heart, and was so sure that we were intended to be together. My heart was broken. I couldn't stand the thought of not spending my life with Amber. In the months that followed, I spent a lot of time with God, alone in the woods, reading my Bible and pouring out my heart to Him. I didn't understand how I could have felt so sure of His will in my life, yet be wrong. I didn't understand, but I chose to trust Him. A year passed. I devoted my focus to my business, my family, and pursuing my relationship with God. I didn't have any desire to look for a wife. I loved Amber, and I didn't want to consider anyone else. After about a year, my heart began to heal, and I decided that I needed to squelch any hope I had about being reunited with Amber. I thought to myself that if I couldn't marry Amber, I would look for someone with her character and her love for God. So I kept my eyes open and made my family aware that I was wanting to be married. But despite the fact that I knew many great young women, I didn't have the desire to pursue any of them.
I thought about Eric nearly all the time for about the first year after we ended our relationship. I turned those thoughts into prayers for him. And looking back, it has been such an incredible journey to see how God lovingly answered each and every one of my prayers for Eric. As time progressed, many things in my life changed. Our family moved several times. We met lots of new families, started fellowshipping with a new church, and had a lot of really fun experiences. One thing we did is we moved to a farm, and I learned how to milk cows. I thought about Eric less and less, yet still, every time a young man would want to pursue me, Papa would say, "Well, he's a good man, but Eric was a million times better." I always wondered at his saying that, because in my heart, I knew the truth of it. Eric was an amazing man, but I still wanted to serve in South America. The Lord taught me so much in those years of separation from Eric. I grew in my faith, and if possible, I fell more in love with my Lord than ever before. One of the hardest lessons still lay ahead of me, though. The Bible tells us in Proverbs that a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps. I had been planning to be a missionary to Venezuela since I was 12 years old. Every single decision I made seemed to revolve around my dream. The jobs I had, the classes I took, even the music that I listened to and the clothing that I wore were based on my dream of being a missionary. God was directing my steps in a different direction, though. He did it so gently and so lovingly, and yet even that was enough to crush me inside. It was 4 years after I met Eric that I realized that my dream had been just that. It was my dream. I repented of trying to lead my own life. I remember the specific moment. I was working in the barn that day, filling the mangers with hay and talking with my Lord. I cried out to him in the words of a song. Jesus, all for Jesus, all I am and have and ever hope to be. It was refreshing and a bit unsettling to not have a goal to aim for. I'd always known what I would do with it. But not anymore. Now I was truly Spirit-led. I was dependent upon my Lord for his leading in every area. But at the same time, it was really sad because the thought occurred to me almost instantly that I had made so many big decisions surrounding my dream of being a missionary. I especially remembered the decision that I had made about Eric and telling him that I wouldn't marry him. And I really, truly regret it. When I thought about going to Jackie's wedding, I knew I would see Eric there, and I was so nervous because, well, I guess seeing him again made me realize just how much I really, truly loved him. I had no idea whether or not he had the same affections. In my mind, he had moved on, but after seeing him again, I thought about him more than ever before. I once again turned every thought of him into a prayer, and this is what I prayed. Lord, please take away my affections for Eric and bless him. A few months passed, and I was not feeling victorious in this at all. I decided to ask my parents to pray for me. I remember coming to the kitchen with tears streaming down my face and telling Papa that I had something that I needed to talk to he and Mama about. I told them that I had been thinking about Eric so much since I saw him at Jackie's wedding, and I just needed to know if they thought that Eric would be an option. If he wasn't an option, I just wanted them to be able to pray with me that God would take him off of my heart. I was really surprised when Papa told me that he really thought Eric was an option. He had talked with him exclusively at Jackie's wedding and had been really impressed with how he had seen Eric mature and grow in his faith. It was then that we began to pray as a family. We prayed that if Eric was the one that God wanted me to marry, that the Lord would bring him into my life again, and maybe even give Papa a phone call. But if he wasn't the one, we asked that God would take him out of my heart and just help it to heal. We prayed about the situation together, but we also knew in our hearts that we shouldn't talk about it with anyone, or even contact Eric. We wanted God to be in complete control of this. We didn't want any hand but the Lord's hand to direct it.
So last year, a couple months after seeing Amber at the wedding, I met a great girl. In fact, the first girl who had captured my attention in that way since being attracted to Amber years ago. I talked to her father about getting to know her, and in the fall of last year, we started a courtship. I didn't really know her at that point, so we spent the first couple months getting to know each other and spending time with her family. I had an incredible time getting to know her and her family.
I had been praying for 9 months since Jackie's wedding about Eric coming back into my life and the Lord, either that or the Lord taking him away from and out of my heart. And one day I received a call from Jackie. It was just after Christmas. And through the course of our conversation, she casually mentioned that Eric was courting someone. She said she was a lovely girl who lived out of state. And there was silence on my end as I tried to hold back my tears. Jackie sensed it because she is my dearest friend. And sobbing, I explained about how I had been praying and about how the Lord had now answered my prayer. I told Jackie that there was no other way. God had closed the door of my heart to Eric. But once again, I was completely broken. Yet, it was the first time in my life that I really felt like I had completely given Eric and his life to the Lord. I thought about him still, almost all the time, but I turned those thoughts into new prayers. I prayed for his courtship, and for his future wife, for his marriage, and for his family. I was so incredibly sad, yet I was so happy all at once. I guess you could call it hope. I felt hope, like the Lord had to have a purpose in all of this.
Well, what God was doing through the courtship came as a surprise to me. He used the courtship with this girl to show me that buried deep in my heart, in a place I didn't even know existed, there burned a deep love for Amber. This came as a shock and surprise to me, as I thought all my feelings for her were gone. Even when I saw her at Jackie's wedding earlier that year, I didn't realize those feelings were still there. It was then that I decided that it wouldn't be right to continue in the courtship, now that I knew that I still loved Amber. And the crazy thing is that even though I loved Amber, I only had a small glimmer of hope that I would actually be an option for her. I determined that even though I didn't have much hope, I needed to take action on the revelation that I did still love her. I felt a strong leading from God that I was to pursue her. I wanted to honor the girl I was courting, so I talked with her father about my realization. He was wise and understanding, and also recommended that I pursue what I felt like God was leading me. So soon after that conversation, I nervously called Amber's dad to tell him about my desire for her and to see if there was any possibility of pursuing her. Well, that day, he told me two things on the phone that came as a huge surprise to me. First, he said that Amber had confided in him that she had had deep feelings for me for the past few years. Secondly, he told me that their family had been praying that if God wanted me to pursue Amber, that I would give him a call. Well, needless to say, I was ecstatic after that phone call. I told him that as soon as possible, I wanted to see Amber again. So after talking to David, I spoke with the girl I was courting and explained what was on my heart and how God had led. She was incredibly gracious and understanding of the situation. We had a really great talk about our relationship up to that point and how God was clearly not leading us to be together. We ended the courtship on great terms, and I still consider her a friend.
A week after I talked to Jackie on the phone, my parents told me that someone had come to them to ask to pursue me for marriage. I was completely blown away. As far as I knew, there was absolutely nobody that was interested in me, and I knew that I wasn't interested in anyone myself. But they sat me down at the breakfast table, and they had written his name on a piece of paper and turned it over so I couldn't see who it was. Suspense was growing as they told me of the meeting that Papa had with him, and for me, the suspense was kind of a bad, unbearable suspense. Because in my mind, there was absolutely no one that I was interested in, and I became really upset thinking about having to tell someone that I didn't want to enter a courtship. Well, when Mama turned the paper over and I saw Eric's name, I couldn't even speak. I just cried with joy. The first words out of my mouth were, "But I thought..." And everything was explained to me the next day by Eric himself. Since that day, the Lord has continued to knit our hearts together. But the best part of the story is knowing that the Lord chose us for each other. I never have to wonder if I made the right choice. My life, and our lives, are in the hand of the one of whom it is said, "And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together."
So, Amber and I began our courtship in January of this year. Pretty much from the beginning, it was a given that it was going to end in marriage. The past 8.5 months have been an incredible time of getting to know Amber again. She is an incredible woman, and I am blessed beyond my dreams that I'm going to be able to call her my wife. Ultimately, we think our story is a testimony to the fact that God is involved in our lives and wants us to wait on Him. He is worthy of our trust, our worship, and our adoration. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt His name together.
There must be a God, I believe it's true, 'cause I can see His love when I look at you. And He must have a plan for this crazy life, because He brought you here and placed you by my side. And I have never been so sure of anything before, like I am in this moment here with you. Now for better or for worse, there's so much more than only words, and I will always hold you up when the strength you have just ain't strong enough. And what tomorrow brings, only time will tell. But I will stand by you in sickness and in health, 'cause I have never been so sure of anything before, like I am in this moment here with you. And now for better or for worse, there's so much more than only words. And I pray every day will be the proof that I mean what I say when I say I do. Yeah, I mean what I say when I say, take my hand and take this ring, and know that I will always love you through anything. Yeah. And as the years march on, like a beating heart, I will live these words till death do us part. 'Cause I have never been so sure of anything before, like I am in this moment here with you. And now for better or for worse, I saw